Greetings, alchemists of YouTube. Alchin here, coming in with a splash, making another Moonstone Island tier list. This time it's going to be the water cards available in the game. In our last video, we did the earth cards, and we got ourselves on a bit of a roll, cascading down the mountain with reckless abandon. This time we're going to pace ourselves a little better, move with a bit more of an ebb and flow, and we're not going to make as many mistakes as we made in that video. I've tested a few things ahead of times here, and I hope to bring you the best information possible. So let's come in with Ablution. Please absolve me if I pronounced that wrong. But what this card does is it removes all conditions from one target for 0 energy. Enemy or ally, buff or debuff, it's all the same. It purifies everything. This is a pretty cool tech piece. You can use it to purge poison from yourself or burn. You could clear Tangle. If the enemy's got an ethereal buff or an intangible buff, you can clear that as well. This versatile card can be used for offense or defense, and at 0 mana, it's infinitely efficient at doing so. We're going to see another card that does this later, but it's a little more all-encompassing. The fact that this is a target makes it a very powerful card indeed. You don't need to run it in all situations, but if you're going to the Fall Temple, if you're heading to the Dungeon, I think this is a card that you for sure want on your supporting water spirits. So for that, I'm going to drop it right here as our first S tier card. We're going to be doing some adjustments when we get through all the cards, and things might move around. So stick around to the end of the video and we'll see if this maintains its place here. Moving on, we're heading down to Big Big Hug. Big Big Hug is a 2 energy card, exhausts when played, and it does 3 times power regen to all allies. This is by far the biggest and most efficient regen card available. Let's assume that you have a mid-level spirit with about 20 power. This would be 60 regen, so that's 60 healing at the start of their turn, 59 the next turn, 58. This ends up being incredibly valuable. Over the course of a long fight, these are more valuable than any of the food options available in the game. So we're going to put this in the A tier. You can always heal outside of battle with food, but if you need to heal in a pinch in battle, this is probably one of the best cards you have to do that with. So for that, I can't justify putting it any lower than the A tier. Moving on to Group Hug, same concept as Big Big Hug, a little cheaper, but a lot less efficient. It applies 1 power regen to all allies. It doesn't exhaust itself, but when you consider just the throughput of Big Big Hug, this is actually kind of a downside. You have to play this card 3 times equal the healing of Big Big Hug, and that 1 Big Big Hug is probably the only heal you'd need for the whole fight. It's just the gift that keeps on giving, and for that reason, I don't think I can justify putting Group Hug above the C tier. If you're in the deeper floors of the Infinite Dungeon that I've made it, there might be a point where you need more and consistent regen, in which case you might want to run a 1-of Group Hug in your deck to just constantly reapply regen and stop it from falling off over the course of longer, grindier fights. But throughout the main story, you'll never need healing like that. And for the vast majority of players, you're not going to need something like Group Hug. It's just not worth the loss in efficiency to have that consistent heal. Next, we're moving on to Holy Water Plus. This card is another 0 mana card, and it reads, remove all conditions from all allies. So, less targeted than Ablution, but it affects all your allies. Again, this does count your buffs as well, but if you're against an enemy Marsha or someone else that's constantly applying widespread debilitating debuffs into the team, this card could be key in protecting you from that. Since it interrupts with some of your own game plans, you want to make sure you're running it in a deck where that's not going to be a problem. In fact, if you run a Big Big Hug at the start of every fight, and then you play a Holy Water, it'll purge that Big Big Hug's regen as well, and then you might wish you had some Group Hugs. So maybe that'll force me to reevaluate that card later. But for now, we're going to toss Holy Water into the B tier. It's a card that has a time and a place. Definitely being able to purge all allies is very useful, but you probably don't want it in every water deck you run. It's a little less flexible than Ablution, and they're both free cards. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. The wideness can be nice at times, but it can hurt you as well if you're doing a game plan that relies on buffing yourselves. So that's as high as it goes for now. Moving on to HP Rain Plus. This applies 0.5 power regen to random allies 5 times for 2 mana. So for 2 mana, it's 2.5 total power healing. If you have 1 spirit, it's just less efficient than Big Hug. And if you have 3 spirits, it's infinitely less efficient than Big Hug. Instead of Big Hug is 3 power to all allies, it's a total of 9 power regen for the same mana cost. I think HP Rain is going to be our first D tier card. It's inefficient. It's random. Yeah, it just, the loss of control, you'd really hope that it'd be a little more efficient than this. But you can't target it. It's not going to hit who you need. It's just like a little passive drip drop of healing. And in the end, we have torrents of healing available in the water pool. Moving on to another card that we're probably going to put in the D tier, Hydromancy. This card could have a time and the place, I guess, at the very start of a playthrough. But once you're 2 or 3 seasons in, you should have enough meditate charms to just upgrade all the cards in your deck. Getting ahead of myself, Hydromancy is a 3 mana exhaust when played card that upgrades all cards in your deck for the rest of combat. So any non-plus cards that can be upgraded will become plus cards when you play this. For 3 mana though, it just eats up an entire turn, and you could just do the same thing out of combat by upgrading all the cards you want upgraded. I can't justify putting this card in the deck. It's a precious deck slot, it's a waste of precious mana, it's a horrible draw. It's just not a card that you ever want to see, if I'm being honest with you. But a card that you always want to see, the incredible 2 rarity Lifepool Plus. For 2 energy, it pools your HP with everyone in the battle and divides it equally between all. You might say, not a lot of control, but when you get into the hyper late game, enemy health pools are much larger than your own. This card might as well read, fully heal your party, cut the enemy's HP in half. Because a lot of times that's what it does. When you average out all the health totals in the fight, yours end up being so much lower that you get almost a full heal, and the enemies lose huge chunks of their health. You don't want to play this later in a fight after you've grinded the enemies down, but it's an exhaust card. It gets out of your way. You put one of these in your deck, you play it after... Depends. If you get the first turn, you probably don't want to play it on the first turn while you're still full, but you might just to damage the enemy. And if the enemy gets their turn before you, and then you draw it in your opening hand, then you just heal off all the damage they do to you in the first turn, and do a huge chunk to them. Absolutely incredible card. If you know what you're doing, you can make crazy things happen with Lifepool Plus. Let's move on now to Regen Plus. Pretty simple 1 energy card, just applies 1 power regen. So yeah, if you have 20 power, you get 20 regen. If you have 30 power, you get 30 regen. It's pretty efficient, it's targeted, not, again, as good as Big Hug, but it's a solid option. Let me compare it real quickly to Group Hug. Because I suppose you could say, at the same energy cost, Group Hug gives the power same to all allies. I know I was just giving the energy like I valued this card, but it's just an inferior version of Group Hug. So honestly, just another D tier card. Yeah. Unfortunate that water effects tend to be pretty inefficient, and healing plans just aren't that great to begin with. If you're going to run a healing plan, you want to make sure that you're running the best options possible. Moving on now to Riptide Plus, our first damaging water card. What it does is it deals 0.5 power water damage to all enemies, and then you draw 2 cards. I believe this is the only card draw card in water. Let me take a quick check on my notes to be absolutely sure. Appears to be the case, yes. So again, we're rating these cards in a vacuum. 0.5 power for 2 mana is highly inefficient. But draw 2 cards is the only card draw option available to you, so I can't just give this a D. The fact that it's retain means that you can hold on to it until you absolutely need it, which is definitely helpful. I think just because it's the only card draw available to the element, we're going to have to put this bad boy in the B tier. It's read and see in my heart and soul, but since it's the only card draw available, and we're trying to do this purely in a vacuum, we do have to value any amount of cycle we can get our hands on. This more than replaces itself. The fact that it's 2 mana really hurts this card, especially when it's so power inefficient. It does a total for 2 against a full enemy board, 1.5 times your power's damage. This is not a good rate. There are much cheaper card draw options in neutral even, let alone in water. So you might just want to run some neutral card draw options on your support water creatures rather than running Riptide. In fact, you know what? I'm going to downgrade this to C tier. The fact that the neutral card pool exists means I don't have to go entirely in a vacuum. There are just way better cards. You could run a Regroup Plus along with a better card, such as the next card on the list, Soak Plus. Deal 1x power water damage to all enemies 3 times for 2. 3x power to all enemies for 2, and it exhausts itself? We're putting this bad boy in the A tier. This is probably, almost definitely, let me take another quick look. Yeah, as far as AoE damage goes, this is definitely the best option available in water. There are some more interesting single target options later, but the fact that this card deletes itself, it does good damage. You could play it alongside a Regroup to kind of simulate a Riptide, but accomplish a heck of a lot more. We're going to call this an A tier card, just because it's A tier damage. It's efficient. Well, it's baseline, I should say. It's the same as a tackle's efficiency, 1.5 per mana, but that's per enemy. This hits all enemies. So yeah, okay. This could be up to 9x power. Yeah, this is a powerful card. Efficient indeed. We're gonna leave it right where it is in A tier. I wasn't really arguing myself out of it either way. but we're happy to see it soaking up that spot. You know, water deserves a good damaging option, and it has one in soak. Moving on now to Tidal Wave Plus. 2 energy, does 2x power water damage to all enemies, doesn't exhaust itself, and it's rarity 4, which is 2 stars higher than Soak. Why does this card exist? I suppose you could run 1 Tidal Wave in an AoE deck. Say you want to make a Water Spirit that has no healing at all. You just want big wave damage. I guess what you would do is you would run 7 Soak Pluses and 1 Tidal Wave. And you would only play the Tidal Wave once all your Soak Pluses were played through. So we're not going to put it in the D tier. It's got a use case. But if you're running a support Water Spirit, if you're trying to trim your deck down, this is just not a great card compared to the other options. If you hit 3 enemies, it is 6 times power for 2, which is decently efficient, I guess. But just the fact that Soak Plus exists just kind of makes this card immediately obsolete. Doesn't synergize as well with Charge, doesn't do as much damage at a baseline. It's just an inferior version of Soak Plus, other than the fact that it sticks around in your deck, which is usually a minus, but again, could be a plus for a one-of copy if you're doing a pure AoE game plan. Let's move on from that to Water Balloon Plus. This removes 2 armor and deals 0.5 times power water damage to all enemies. The unupgraded version just removes 1 armor and deals the same amount of damage to all enemies. This might be one of the worst upgrades in the game, but it's also the only dedicated armor shred card that water gets. You'd probably be rather bashing most of the time, though. I don't know, AoE armor shred, 1 energy, removes 6 armor. I'm gonna put this tentatively in the B tier. It's certainly better than Tidal Wave. Even though it does significantly less damage than Tidal Wave, the armor shred could be very useful. You could dizzy. No, it just. I don't know. I don't know about this one, because 2 armor is nothing in the hyper late game. No, I want to move this down. Okay. The only use case I can see for this card is if you're playing like a deck that infinitely cycles. You could chip someone down really hard with that 2 armor. You could play this card like 20 times in a turn, I guess. Well, that's a weird cheese deck. I don't think I should consider that in my rating as like normal play, quote unquote. In the early game, I think you'd rather this than Tidal Wave, but pretty soon the enemy armor is going to get out of control. Enemies are going to have 20, maybe even 30 armor, and that's even before you get into the Infinite Dungeon, where things start to cycle way out of control. I don't think I can justify putting this above Tidal Wave. I think this goes at the bottom of the C tier. It's an interesting thought. It's nice that it's AoE. But these like remove 2 armor cards that don't scale just fall off so hard in the late game that I can't really justify, putting them in high tier positions. These aren't really cards that you're going to want to run in an end game deck. They're kind of just a band-aid solution for getting through the early Earth Islands, and like, why do you want to build around that? Let's move on then to our first Waldo exclusive card. This is Waterfall. Waterfall's a pretty neat card. The upgraded version deals damage equal to double your armor. So, hold on, let me check real quick. Again, in my notes. Yeah, this is a 1 mana card, deals damage equal to double your armor. So instead of scaling with an offensive stat, this card scales with a defensive stat. This could be pretty cool if you're running a support spirit, although all of your healing options scale with your power, so you are going to want some power on your support water unit. But this lets you go really tanky and still have a damage option, which I can't say that's not valuable. I can't say that's nothing. If you get hurt, if the enemy starts to bash you, this card does less and less damage, so it can fall off in a fight, but then you get dizzied and then your armor comes back, and it's back up to where it was. This is an interesting card. I'm going to put it in the B tier, I think. If your healing moves didn't scale with power, I'd probably put it in the A. But you can't just completely forego power and just go like a crazy tank build, which is where this would really shine. I suppose you could play that build. Okay. Well, hold on. You could mostly just have a deck that's this and a bunch of ablutions. You know what? We're going to put this in A tier. It enables a playstyle that's pretty interesting. I don't think it's like a great playstyle, but you could just run like a health armor exclusive spirit, and you could run a bunch of water walls, and you could do some pretty cool stuff. It's double your armor too. So that's like a 2x power scaling, but with armor instead. That's a neat playstyle. We're gonna leave it in the A tier. I think it's neat. I like things that are neat. Yeah, and just interesting stuff all around. Moving on to Water Wheel Plus. This is a 2 mana to energy rather card. Deals 1.5x water damage multiplied by the number of enemies in combat. So this just hits one person. If there's 3 enemies, it's 2 mana, 4.5x power. And then as the enemies start to fall, it gets weaker, going down to 2 mana, 3 power, and then 2 mana, 1.5 power. I think it's just a B tier card. The problem with this is that, yes, it's very mana efficient for the damage it does when you're against 3 opponents. But then you kill that opponent, and it becomes a card that swings at par, and then you kill an opponent, and it becomes a card that's below average. So if you average it over the course of the fight, it's just an average damage card, and that's not good. The absolute high roll is what stops it from being a C rank card, I think. Yeah, we're just going to leave it here in the B tier. Moving on now to our final card, Waterfall Plus. 1 energy deals 2x power water damage to 1 enemy. We put Rock Throw and the Earth Tree in the D tier because there were a lot of good damaging cards in Earth. Water doesn't have a ton of great damaging cards, as we've kind of gone through. This is kind of equivalent to Tidal Wave in its efficiency. Tidal Wave for 2 mana hits for 3 total power against 3 enemies. This for 1 mana hits 2 against 1. Yeah, this is a better rate than Tidal Wave. How does it compare to Soak? 1 power to all enemy 3 times for 2. So 1 power to yeah. I don't know. This is like a C tier card. It's just a flat, generic damaging option for water, which water's lacking. But, like, it's not really your game plan when you're playing water, you know? You should be focusing either on a healing support, or you should go on some sort of AoE damage kick, or you should go a degenerate full tank playstyle. Yeah, we're gonna put this at the top of D tier. It just doesn't fit into any of Water's game plans. It's not like a garbage card. It's, you know, quote unquote above rate if you're considering tackling the growing rate for damage. Just generic. It just doesn't do much. Better than HP Rain. Definitely better than Hydromancy. Let's reorder our list a little bit. We're gonna put Regen. Hold on. Regen is 2x power for 1. And then Regen is 1x power. And then 1x power minus 1, and then 1x power minus 2, and then 1x power minus 3. Yeah. Regen's more efficient than Waterfall. You might want to run it just to chip up, but probably not. You probably end up running. We're going to graduate Big Hug to B tier. Considering only because Big Hug, sorry, Group Hug gets graduated to B tier. Only because Big Hug exhausts itself, and this is like the only other like good efficient healing option in the end. We put it above Water Wheel. Yeah, we do. We don't put it above the AoE Purge though. I think this tier is fine. This is like a gimmick playstyle. This is definitely correct up here. Leave this as it is. This is the list as it exists. I'm pretty happy with how it ended up. I'm glad we took the time. I'm sure I'm going to come to some regrets in my heart and soul, as always, while I'm timestamping this. But for now, I'm going to hope that I don't have to make my traditional regret comment down below the video, and that I can just call this a tier list that I'm happy with. So hey, thanks for spending this time with me here today. Go ahead and, if it helped you at all, like the video. If you don't like the video, if you think I'm an idiot, if you think I'm wrong, then comment to say so down below. The secret is that every bit of engagement helps. And yeah, pass the video around if you can, subscribe to the channel if you want. I mostly stream on this channel, but I'll probably think of reasons to continue making content like this for whatever games I end up playing. I play a lot of creature collectors, I play a lot of RPGs, but I play a little bit of everything. These videos are a little cleaner than my usual fare. My first spirit tier list aside, I try not to swear too much during these. So if you're not comfortable with harsh language, I don't really recommend popping into my streams. But otherwise, you know, you don't owe me anything. If this is the only bit of content you were interested in, thanks for making it this far in the video, not for clicking away. I appreciate each and every one of you that make it this far. So until next time, this has been Alex, Alchin, Altune, whatever the heck you want to call me. And until next time, all I gotta say is goodbye. Thanks for coming. See you whenever it is you want to be seen.